There was a moment in human history where the world was still whole, and the story of humanity was just beginning. It starts not with empires or emperors, but with a people, a continent, and a question. Where do we come from? The first humans walked these lands over 300,000 years ago, their lives shaped by the rhythm of the earth and the silence of the stars. They were not just survivors. They were the architects of a future we're still writing. From the depths of the continent, a story unfolds, not of conquest, but of movement. It's the story of how people began to leave their roots, chasing horizons they could not yet see. The first great expansions were not driven by greed, but by necessity, curiosity, and the quiet pull of the unknown. They were the first steps toward a shared human story. This is the origin of everything, not just of people, but of ideas, of culture, of the very idea of history itself. We are the descendants of these first steps, walking the same path into the future. So what exactly are we talking about? It's not just about maps or migration routes. It's about the movement of people, ideas, and cultures, humanity's earliest journeys across the globe. These were not just physical migrations. They were acts of survival, adaptation, and innovation. People followed rivers, crossed deserts, and navigated forests in search of food, shelter, and community. This is not a story of conquest, but of connection, of how people built bridges between distant lands, exchanging knowledge, language, and traditions long before the world was divided by borders. The first great expansions were not just about movement, but about transformation. They were the seeds of the world we know today, rooted in the soil of ancient Africa and carried across the globe. You might not think it matters, but the roots of every civilization lie in the same soil, African soil. Every language, every rhythm, every story you hear today has its origin in the ancient rhythms of the continent. The first great migrations, the first great expansions, they were not just events. They were the shaping of human destiny, the first chapters of a story that still echoes in every corner of the world. You might not realize it, but your understanding of history is incomplete if you ignore Africa. The movements of people, the spread of ideas, the birth of cultures, they all have a shared origin. History is not just about what happened. It's about who we are, where we come from, and how we are connected. Ignoring Africa is ignoring the very foundation of our shared humanity. To care about these origins is to care about your own. It's to understand that you are not just a product of the present. You are a continuation of something ancient, something powerful, something worth knowing. The first humans walked the savannas of Africa, their footsteps echoing across time. They were not just survivors, but creators, shaping the world with tools, language, and art. From these roots, great migrations began. They moved across continents, carrying with them not just survival, but culture, knowledge, and the seeds of civilization. They built cities, forged empires, and spread ideas. But always the journey continued. A relentless human drive to explore, to connect, and to leave a mark. This is not just history. It is the story of us, of where we came from and where we are going. A journey that never ends, only evolves. Imagine a world where people didn't know about the moon, but they did know the stars. They watched them move and learned to read the sky like a book. They traveled far, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. They followed rivers, found new lands, and built homes in places they never imagined. Every step they took was a story, written in the ground, in the sky, in the hearts of those who walked before them. They didn't just move, they grew. They built, they learned, they shared. And from that growth came the first great journeys of humankind. Before the first ship left the shore, there was a gathering of people. voices rising in song and conversations, hands shaping the future with the rhythm of shared dreams. They spoke of lands beyond the horizon, of trade and knowledge, of the stories that had passed through generations, like seeds carried by the wind. The vessel was more than wood and sail. It was a promise, a vessel of human curiosity and ambition, built from the sweat of many hands and the hope of many hearts. The people stood in silence as the last ropes were tied, their eyes reflecting the weight of what was about to be done, the first step in a journey that would change the world. This was the moment when the past met the future, when the people of the land turned their gaze toward the sea, and the world began to expand. The mechanism begins with the first great migrations. As humans left the African homeland, they carried with them not just tools, but a profound understanding of the natural world, passed down through generations in stories and survival skills. They moved not in haste, but with purpose, following rivers, following animals, and following the whispers of the earth. Every step was a decision, every path a reflection of their knowledge and curiosity. With each journey, they encountered new landscapes, new challenges, and new possibilities. Their survival depended on adaptation, on learning from the environment and from one another. They built shelters, hunted, gathered, and traded. Over time, these interactions created networks of movement and exchange, laying the foundation for the first great expansions of humanity. These movements were not random. They were the result of a deep, evolving understanding of the world. The mechanism of expansion was not just physical. It was intellectual, cultural, and deeply human. The clever twist came not from conquest, but from the reinvention of movement itself. The idea was to turn migration into an engine of expansion, not destruction. They didn't just travel. They transformed. Trade routes became the arteries of a new world, spreading not only goods, but ideas, tools, and ways of life. This was the trick, to make movement a form of progress, to turn the act of going somewhere into the act of becoming something new. The first great expansions weren't about taking over, but about connecting. They built bridges between distant lands, and in doing so, rewrote the world. Beneath the surface of history lies a science that shaped the course of human destiny. It was not just the movement of people, but the movement of ideas, tools, and knowledge that carry our ancestors forward. Genetic markers and archaeological finds trace the earliest migrations, but they also reveal a deeper truth. The exchange of knowledge across vast distances was as vital as the movement of bodies. This was not a single path, but a web of connections. Each migration, each exchange, built upon the knowledge of those who came before, forming the foundation of what would become human civilization. And in the quiet hum of this scientific progress, we find the first echoes of what it means to be human, not just to live, but to evolve, to understand, and to carry forward the weight of history. Imagine a river, wide and deep, its banks lined with ancient trees and the roots of 1,000 civilizations. This river is the Nile, but it's not just water. It's the lifeblood of a people who built empires from its banks. Now, imagine this river is not just a physical path, but a metaphor for the movement of people, goods, and ideas. It carries not only water, but the seeds of culture, the echoes of language, and the weight of history. This river is also a mirror. It reflects the journey of humanity from the earliest migrations to the great expansions that shaped the world. It shows us how we are all connected, even if we don't always see it. In the end, the river doesn't just flow. It teaches. It teaches us about the origins of our world, the roots of our traditions, and the shared destiny of all who have ever walked its banks. So, let's not be too proud of our achievements, nor too blind to our origins. The river is still flowing, and it has a story to tell, one that is as old as time and as human as we are. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end. There's a quiet kind of courage in walking where the earth ends and the sky begins. The world is vast, but it's the spaces between that often shape the lives we lead. Every step across these lands is a step away from the familiar, toward the unknown. We are not just moving through places. We are moving through time, memory, and the weight of the world. To cross these barriers is to face the cold, not just of the earth, but of the soul. We're talking about the invisible lines that divide us. The mountains, the oceans, the deserts that separate people from their resources, their homes, their families. These aren't just borders. They're barriers that shape destinies. We're talking about the climate that makes some places livable and others uninhabitable. The storms that erase villages, the droughts that turn fields to dust. It's not just about weather. It's about survival. We're talking about the people who cross these barriers not for conquest, but for necessity, for hope, for a chance to rebuild. They carry their past with them, and they risk everything to reach a future. We're talking about the stories of those who have made the journey, the ones who have seen the world from both sides, who have known what it means to be on the edge of the map and the edge of hope. And we're talking about the responsibility we all share, to listen, to act, to ensure that no one has to cross a barrier in search of survival alone. You think your life is far from the edges of the map, but the world is a fragile thing, and the lines we draw are not always safe. Every border, every mountain, every river is more than just a boundary. It's a place where people live, breathe, and dream. You may never walk that path, but you carry the same sky, the same sun, and the same fragile hope that the world will remain just as it is. When you ignore the places that are far away, you're not just ignoring a map. You're ignoring the lives that are already being reshaped by the hands of time and climate. The world is not divided by lines on a page. It's divided by the people who live in it, and their stories are the ones we must carry. We start in the 1800s, when the world was still a map of borders and frontiers. The great empires rose and fell, but it was the people who moved. Caravans across deserts, ships through ice-laden seas, and the first explorers chasing the unknown. In the early 1900s, the world changed. Railroads stretched across continents, and steamships turned oceans into highways. But with every step forward, the climate whispered warnings that were often ignored. The 1950s and 1960s brought new technology, but also new challenges. The earth began to crack under the weight of human ambition, and the barriers we built to cross the world started to crumble under the pressure of nature itself. By the 1980s, the world was both connected and divided. Climate patterns grew more erratic, and the very land we sought to master began to resist us. The movement of people, goods, and ideas was no longer just a story of progress. It became a story of survival. In the 21st century, we face a new kind of frontier, not just physical, but ecological. The challenge is not to conquer, but to coexist. To cross the barriers, we must first understand them. This is the story of humanity's relentless drive to move, to connect, and to adapt. But in the end, the greatest barrier we face is not the earth itself, but the choices we make in the face of it. Imagine you're standing at the edge of a big, empty field. You can't see the other side, but you know someone is waiting on the other side. You take one step, then another, and with every step you're getting closer to them. Sometimes the field is not just big. It's full of things that try to stop you. Trees, rocks, rivers, storms. But you keep going, because you know the person on the other side is waiting for you. Some people never make it, but the ones who do, they change the world. Not because they were special, but because they were brave enough to walk through the field, even when the wind was against them. That's what it means to cross barriers. not just with your feet, but with your heart. To believe that even when the world feels too far away, you are still close enough to reach. Before any journey begins, there must be a purpose, a reason that outweighs the weight of distance and the cost of time. It is not just movement, but a call to something greater than self. The setup is not just about location. It is about intention. Every step must be measured. Every decision weighed against the unknown. You do not simply go somewhere. You prepare to meet something. In the silence before action, there is a reckoning. You acknowledge the barriers, the mountains, the storms, the silence that comes between places. You accept that the journey will not be easy. This is where the story begins. Not with movement, but with resolve. Not with answers, but with questions. The setup is the foundation, the moment when you choose to step beyond the known. The setup is not an end. It is the breath before the first step. It is the quiet before the storm, the pause before the crossroads, the moment when you realize you are not just moving, you are becoming. The mechanism begins with a subtle shift in perspective, acknowledging that barriers are not just physical, but also psychological. It is the moment we choose to see beyond the horizon, not as an obstacle, but as a threshold. This shift is not immediate. It requires patience, a willingness to dwell in the space between here and there, where uncertainty lingers like a shadow in the morning light. Then, a decision is made, not to cross the barrier, but to change the way it is understood. It is a quiet revolution, a redefinition of what it means to move through space and time. This mechanism is not about force, but about reimagining the landscape as a map of possibility. It is the recognition that geography is not a prison, but a canvas, waiting to be rewritten. And in this reimagining, the barrier transforms. It is no longer a wall, but a bridge, built not of stone, but of understanding, and paved with the courage to move forward. The clever twist is not in the destination, but in the journey itself. It is in the way the path bends, the way the route folds back on itself, the way the problem is redefined. Sometimes the greatest breakthroughs come not from pushing harder, but from looking sideways. It is the shift in perspective that unlocks the next step, the next idea, the next possibility. The twist is often simple, but its impact is profound. It is the realization that the barrier is not a wall, but a bridge, that the problem is not a destination, but a journey with many routes. This is the magic of human ingenuity, not just in the solving, but in the reimagining, in the willingness to walk a different road, even when the map says otherwise. And so, the twist is not just a step forward, but a step back, a step sideways, a step into the unknown. It is the moment when the impossible becomes possible, not because of strength, but because of vision. Beneath every step we take across the land, there is a quiet, relentless rhythm. Earth shifting, rivers carving paths, glaciers retreating. This is the heartbeat of the planet, a pulse that has shaped our world for millennia. The climate is not a distant force. It is the air we breathe, the ground we walk on, and the water that nourishes the roots of all life. It is both a cradle and a barrier, ever-changing, ever-present. The science of climate and terrain is not cold or detached. It is a testament to resilience, to adaptation, to the quiet persistence of life against all odds. To cross these barriers is not to ignore the science, but to listen to it. To understand that the land is not a thing to be conquered, but a living entity that has always carried us forward. Imagine a river, wide and slow, separating two villages that have lived in silence for generations. The water is not hostile, but it is a wall. And every crossing is a risk. One village grows rice, the other salt. They trade only in dreams and whispers. The river is not the enemy, but it is the reason they have never met. They meet in the middle of the bridge, neither speaking, just staring. The bridge is the only place where the two worlds touch, and yet it feels like the edge of the world. One day, the river dries. The bridge is no longer needed. The two villages walk together, their paths merging, their stories no longer divided by water, but by choice. The river was never the problem. It was just the way things were. But when the water recedes, the truth becomes clearer. We are all standing on the same ground. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end. You know that moment when you're in a place where the air feels different? Like it's holding its breath, waiting for you to step into the unknown. You feel it in your bones. You're not just visiting a place. You're entering a story, one that's been written in the language of stone, fire, and memory. And yet, there is something oddly comforting in the strangeness. A quiet recognition that we are all just travelers in the same vast, uncharted story. It's not about finding yourself in another place. It's about finding yourself in the way the world changes you, even when you don't realize it. That's the strange, beautiful truth of cultural exchange. It's not just about what we bring, but what we become because of it. So what exactly are we talking about? It's not just about language or food. It's about how we carry our stories, our wounds, and our hopes across borders, like ripples in a shared ocean. Cultural exchange isn't always easy. It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. There's friction, misunderstanding, and sometimes broken things. But in that friction, something remarkable happens. We learn to listen, to see, to feel beyond what we thought we knew about each other. Adaptation is not about losing who we are. It's about expanding our world, about finding new ways to belong without forgetting where we came from. Shared humanity isn't something we find. It's something we create, moment by moment, through the quiet act of showing up, listening, and letting go. You think your life is your own, but it's shaped by the echoes of others. The way you speak, the stories you tell, the things you find beautiful. They're all borrowed, reshaped, and passed down through time. When you learn a new language, you're not just gaining words. You're learning how to feel, how to think, how to belong to a world that's not your own. And that makes you more than you were before. You don't have to be an expert, or a traveler, or a hero. You just have to be present, to listen, to wonder, to care, even if it's just a little, about the people who are not you. In a world that often pulls us apart, cultural exchange is the quietest act of solidarity. It's a way of saying, I see you, I remember, I belong to this shared story. We start in the cradle of civilization, where rivers once carved the paths of human connection. The first exchanges were not just of goods, but of ideas, language, and ritual, all woven into the fabric of shared existence. As people moved, they carried stories like seeds. Some grew into new traditions, others were lost to the winds of time. The Silk Road was more than a route. It was a bridge between worlds, where silk met spice and faiths crossed borders. The Mongol Empire once stretched from east to west, and with it came a new kind of connectivity. Cities like Samarkand and Baghdad became melting pots where scholars, traders, and travelers met in the glow of oil lamps. Even in times of war, there was exchange, not just of weapons, but of knowledge and culture. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 did not end the flow of ideas. It merely changed the direction of their course. Today, we still move across borders, not just in flesh, but in thought and code. The internet has become a new Silk Road, where cultures meet, adapt, and evolve in real time. Through it all, The human story has always been one of movement, of trying to understand what is different, and finding in that difference something that makes us feel less alone. Imagine you're at a dinner table, and everyone is sharing a story. Some are about their home, some about the sky, some about the stars. We all have different words for the same things, but we're all trying to say the same thing. When you're little, you don't know the words for everything. So you watch, you listen, and you learn. You start to understand that the world is made of many voices, but they're all singing the same song. Sometimes we don't know how to say something, so we borrow words, or we make new ones. We adapt, not to change who we are, but to understand each other better. The world is not one big conversation. It's many conversations, all trying to find a way to speak to each other. And sometimes that's the hardest part, not knowing how to say thank you in the right way. But even if we don't speak the same language, we can still share a moment, a smile, a gesture, a story. And in that moment, we're not just different, we're connected. Before any exchange can happen, there must be a bridge. A moment when two worlds, often distant and unfamiliar, meet at a single point, like the edge of a river meeting the shore. This is the first step, the setup. It is not a grand event, but a fragile beginning. A shared gaze, a moment of silence, the weight of curiosity and the fear of the unknown. In this moment, the world narrows. The traveler is not just a stranger, but a symbol of something larger. A bridge, a question, an invitation to step beyond the familiar. The setup is not about grand gestures, but small, deliberate choices. It is about opening a door, not with force, but with the gentlest touch, allowing the other to choose whether to enter. This is the first step, the beginning of a story that will unfold in many ways. It is not the end of the journey, but the moment that sets it in motion. It begins with a shared glance, a moment where two worlds pause. In that silence, the possibility of connection is born. We see it in the eyes of strangers who momentarily understand each other's pain. Then comes the first step, listening. Not just hearing, but truly hearing. It is in the spaces between words that understanding takes root. We see it in the way people hold their breath, waiting for the next sentence. Next, there is the act of translation, not just of language, but of meaning. It is a delicate dance between what is said and what is felt. We see it in the way gestures cross borders and become symbols of trust. Then comes the risk. To adapt is to change, and change is never without cost. We see it in the way people carry their heritage like a fragile heirloom, knowing it may never be the same again. Finally, there is the moment of becoming. Not losing oneself, but allowing the self to expand. It is a quiet revolution, unfolding in the heart, not the mind. We see it in the way people carry the weight of history and still choose to walk forward. It's not enough to meet, to share, to understand. There has to be a moment where the familiar becomes strange, and the strange becomes familiar, where the echo of your own voice becomes a foreign sound. This is where the clever twist happens. Not in words, but in the quiet shift of perspective. You begin to see your own culture not as fixed, but as fluid, as something that can be shaped by others, and by time. This is the third step, the clever twist. It's not just about exchange. It's about the moment when the past meets the present, then something new is born from the collision. In this moment, you don't just share culture. You begin to see the world as a tapestry, not a wall. Every thread is different, but together they hold the shape of something greater than any one of them. That's how it works. Not through force, not through fear, but through the quiet, sacred act of seeing the world through another's eyes and allowing yourself to be seen in return. Beneath the surface of our shared stories, there is a science of connection, a biology of empathy that pulses through every human heart. Our brains, shaped by millennia of evolution, are wired not just for survival, but for community, for the rhythm of shared experience. This is not magic. It is the quiet hum of human resonance, a biological echo of our commonality. The science of cultural exchange is not just about what we share. It is about how we feel, how we remember, and how we carry each other's stories. In this hum, we find not only the past, but the future. A future built not on division, but on the deep biological truth of our shared humanity. Imagine two rivers, one from the mountains of Tibet, the other from the forests of Brazil. They flow separately for miles, but one day they meet. They don't fight, they don't merge. Instead, they form a new, strange, and beautiful river. Each river has its own rhythm, its own story, but together they create a current that neither could have formed alone. They carry different sediments, different life, but they flow as one. This is how we become more than ourselves. We are not just the people we were, but the people we've become through the stories we've shared, the ways we've changed, and the truths we've found in each other. We are all just rivers, flowing toward the sea of time, carrying with us the weight of our past and the promise of our future. And in that flow, we find meaning, connection, and purpose. So let us be rivers, not barriers. Let us flow, not fight. Let us meet, not merge, but find a new way to carry the world forward. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end. There's a quiet rhythm to the world, one that's been shaped by the movement of people across time and space. We don't always see it, but it's everywhere. In the dust on the roads, in the stories we carry, in the way we find home. Migration isn't just about places. It's about the weight of belonging, the ache of leaving, and the courage to move toward something unknown. It's the legacy of survival, passed down through generations. The modern world is full of movement, but it's not always easy. There's a cost to moving, a price paid in time, in trust, and the things we leave behind. Today, we're looking at migration not just as a journey, but as a force, one that shapes our future, our identity, and the world we live in. This is the story of movement, and it's far from over. We talk about movement, not just of people, but of ideas, of hope, of survival. Migration is the pulse of history, the rhythm of change, the silent echo of those who left behind everything. It's the story of families who pack their few belongings and walk for days, not for adventure, but for safety, for future, for a chance to breathe again. Migration is not a single moment, but a journey. A slow, painful, beautiful unfolding of lives reshaped by necessity and courage. It's the weight of the past carried forward, the memory of home etched into the bones of those who move, and the quiet hope that somewhere a new home is waiting. We are talking about people who have no choice but to move, not because they want to, but because they must. Their stories are the quietest revolution of our time. You might think this is someone else's story, but it's not. Every move, every shift, every migration is a thread in the fabric of your own life. You carry the weight of their journeys in your own. When you travel for work, when you move for a better life, when you change your address for a fresh start, these are all forms of migration. The difference is you get to choose when to leave. But for millions, there is no choice. They are uprooted by war, by famine, by climate, by violence. Their movement is not a choice. It's a survival. So, You should care, because the world we live in is shaped by the choices and struggles of those who were forced to move, and the future of this world depends on how we respond. We begin not with the present, but with the first footprints in the dust. When humans first walked out of Africa, driven by survival, curiosity, and the need to find more than just survival, they moved across continents, leaving behind the familiar for the unknown, carrying with them not just bodies, but stories, tools, and the first seeds of culture. As centuries passed, migration became a tapestry of forced displacement, trade, and reinvention, each movement etched into the bones of history and the fabric of the present. From the Silk Road to the transatlantic slave trade, from the Great Migration to the refugee crises of today, movement has always been both a necessity and a burden. In every step, there is a story of loss and longing, of hope and resilience, each movement a chapter in the ever-expanding book of human existence. Imagine you're walking with your family, not toward a home, but toward something new. You carry your stories, your dreams, and your fears in your heart. You don't know what's ahead, but you know you must move. The world is changing, and sometimes the only way to survive is to go somewhere else. You leave behind what you know, but you don't forget it. You carry it with you, like a song you can't stop listening to. Migration is not just about moving places. It's about carrying your past with you and hoping that somewhere you'll find a future. Sometimes you don't know where you're going, but you keep walking. Because sometimes the only way to belong is to keep moving. The first step is always the pull. A whisper of opportunity, a flicker of hope, a promise of something better, often just beyond the horizon of the known. In the heart of a homeland, there is a quiet tension between staying and leaving, between roots and wings, between duty and desire. It is a moment that lingers in the heart, the last glance at the home you are leaving, the first breath of freedom, the beginning of a journey that will reshape lives. This is where the story begins, not with a grand declaration, but with a single step, a single choice, and the quiet courage of those who dare to move. Once the decision is made, the journey begins. It is not a single step, but a chain of choices, each one carrying the weight of the past and the promise of the future. The movement is often guided by necessity, by the pull of opportunity or the push of survival. It is a dance of hope and fear, of small steps taken in the dark. The system is not just about borders and visas. It is about identity, about belonging, about the struggle to be seen and to be allowed to stay. In every step, there is a story. In every border, a history. The mechanism is not just of movement, but of memory, of loss, of the fragile hope that the next step will be the right one. The third step is not about movement, but about transformation. It's the moment when the traveler becomes something new, shaped by the journey, by the places they pass through, by the people they've left behind. This twist is not just in the destination, but in the way the traveler is changed along the way. The roads they walk, the cities they pass, the languages they learn. These become part of their identity, a second skin. The clever twist is that migration is not just about going somewhere. It's about becoming someone else. It's about the weight of the past and the promise of the future, and the strange new self that lives in between. In this moment, the traveler is both the one who left and the one who arrived. The journey is not an end, but a becoming that is neither easy nor simple, but necessary, like the turning of the earth. Beneath the surface of every journey, there is a rhythm of life, a pulse of existence that science has only just begun to map. It's in the way our bodies remember where we've been, how our cells carry the memory of roots, Geneticists now trace the echoes of ancient movements through our DNA, revealing how our ancestors crossed deserts, crossed oceans, crossed the boundaries of time and space. The science of movement is not just about where we go, but how we are changed by the journey, how we carry the weight of displacement, how we adapt, how we remember. There is a quiet truth in the science of migration. It is not just about survival, but about the shaping of identity, the redefinition of home, the unfolding of memory in the bones. Imagine a river, wide and slow, carrying stones, silt, and the remnants of a once vibrant forest. It moves with purpose, but not in a hurry. Now, picture the banks of that river. Not just earth, but a mosaic of people, places, and histories. Each piece shaped by the water's touch. Migration is like that river. It carries stories, dreams, and burdens. It does not ask for permission, only space to move. Sometimes the river stops, but even in stillness, it waits for the wind to change, for the earth to shift, for the call to move again. And so we return to the question, not of where we are, but of where we are going. The river never stops asking. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end.